There's also a kind of loyalty that turns into a sense of, I'm going to be loyal to something at all costs. When that happens, then you end up with a lot of the really toxic things that we've seen.
Hey, I'm Jody.
And I'm Chris.
And we are Loving the Outcome. Welcome to our podcast.
We're a husband and wife who rock out together.
We're parents of Milo and Ziggy.
And we're following Jesus as best we can.
Our story began in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we fell in love, got married, and decided to sell everything and travel in our Jetta, selling CDs out of the trunk of our car.
The road led us to Nashville, where we signed a record deal, started our family, and now the four of us travel together in our minibus, White Neptune.
I know, crazy, right? Our life is a road trip.
And we want to invite you into it.
So come along for the ride as we chat with some of our favorite people about family, spirituality, wellness,
and of course, music.
Come on, let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast.
Today is a good one. They're all good. But I think it's fair to say that we
hit it out of the park with this one.
I mean, we've been excited. This has been on the book since before our house flooded, and it got pushed a few times. And pinch me, Dr. Russell Moore was just sitting around our table drinking coffee, eating my pumpkin muffins.
He lives just down the road from where we are staying right now.
It's so crazy because being from Canada, I mean, I didn't even really know what the SBC stood for, like the Southern Baptist what, and then we got here, and in a political climate like we currently have, Russell Moore has just really spoken to our hearts and our heads equally in a really, just polarizing time. And the funny thing is, I don't think that we would even vote the same if we could vote here. And I think that's what's beautiful. I mean, I don't know that for sure, and it doesn't matter. I just know we come from different lenses, different faith backgrounds and traditions. And he's just someone who's really helped us see things in a new light.
Yep. He has written a number of books. His most recent one is called The Courage to Stand, and it's a little embarrassing. I don't have the actual cover for it anymore.
Well loved.
It's well loved. Yeah, the Courage to Stand, Facing Your Fear Without Losing Your Soul, and it's a great read.
Yeah, and he also sends out, it's called More to the Point, and you probably already get it. It's a newsletter that he sends out. And so if you don't know who he is a public theologian. He currently works for Christianity Today. And before that, he was the head of ethics and religion for the Southern Baptist Convention. And when things started to just not sit well with him, which he talks a lot about and gives a lot of amazing, thoughtful reasons for it, he left the SBC, which has only just happened in recent months. So he had a lot to say, and we had a lot to ask.
And we recorded it the week of Halloween, which turns out to be his favorite holiday.
And we're not going to tell you why.
And we got to talk about that too.
You're going to have to listen.
So that was fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a good podcast when you can talk about Halloween, speaking in the White House, giving counsel to presidents. I mean, this guy.
And Jimmy Buffett.
It's all there. It's going to be a great episode. So let's jump in.
Hey, everyone.
We are so pumped. Today we have Dr. Russell Moore on the podcast in our living room. Like, pinch me. I'm so pumped. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So exciting. We have pages and pages of things we want to talk to you about. Okay. But first off, we need you to answer all the questions for us.
Okay, all right.
But first off, we had so many people ask us if it's true that Halloween is your favorite holiday.
It is. And it was not until very recently when I felt like I could say that publicly.
I was going to say.
Because it would be kind of controversial, but It really is. And
so tell us why. I want to know.
I think part of it is there's something about, if you think of Maurice Sendek's Where the Wild Things Are, that sense that kids know there's something out there. And Halloween is the day where the adults didn't pretend like that wasn't the case. So it was almost kind of a cathartic thing. But then secondly, I think because the stakes were kind of low. When it comes to sort of family drama and all that, I mean, nobody slams the door and says, "You've ruined my Halloween." That just doesn't...
Maybe
that's
everyone
good.
is going to love Halloween this year. That's so good.
I always think of the Seinfeld. One of Seinfeld's bits was you'd get all ready for Halloween, and then because he's from New York, you'd put on your parka over top, and it's like we totally related that. I mean, Winnipeg, end of October, it could be -20. And you're just like, I have this awesome new costume that I'm so excited about, and I have to put my jacket over top.
Yeah, in Biloxi, Mississippi, it was more. This costume is making me sweaty because it's
Right.
so hot.
Your
So
costume
we never
comes
had
off.
we never had parkas to deal with,
Oh,
even
man.
at Christmas. So,
Yeah, the kid
Yeah.
who chose to be Tarzan was like, that was a good choice.
that's right.
Well, in that bag, you can open it later, but we got you some Halloween treats.
Oh, awesome.
We were
Swag.
hoping.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
some swag. Our first year here, we dressed up Milo, our 1-year-old, as a wolf because that's his middle name. Not like thinking it was like Halloween. It'll be like a bit of snow. Our first year in Nashville, it was like 90 degrees.
Oh, yeah.
It was a
Oh
terrible
yeah,
decision.
yeah. Lessons learned.
He was not happy.
Well, speaking of that, we come from such a different place than you come from, and it's been beautiful to be challenged by you, if I can be honest. We get more to the point, and it takes me a while to get through because you're quite smart, and I am like, okay, babe, what does this mean? Help me figure this out. He has a religion degree, so I'll be like, talk to me. But no, it's been
So long ago.
but it's been so good because I don't just want to follow people I agree with. And honestly, like I didn't really know what the SBC was when we moved to Nashville. I'm going to be so honest. We moved here and ended up on a tour called Winter Jam. And the people that started it, I think they're from the Southern Baptist
I think so.
Convention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we learned a little bit quickly, but honestly, we've been here like almost 10 years and we're just starting to understand. Oh, okay. Our lens is a little different as Canadians in general. And so I guess today I wanted to ask you so much because really in Canada, I think it's fair to say religion and politics are not tied at the hip in the same way.
Yeah. Maybe they're, joined at the pinky instead.
Yeah.
But definitely in the last few, I mean, when we moved here, Obama was president, and we would just ignorantly, Canadians love conversation. Yeah. I think a lot of people do, but we've forgotten how to maybe disagree well, and conflict isn't normal anymore. But we ignorantly would just go into a writing session and be like, so, like, universal health care, like, let's talk about it. And people are like, what? Who are these people? And, like, how do I sit in a room and write a song with them? Yes. So it's been a journey, to say the least. Yes. And I think, I want to talk to you about so many things because I want to know about women behind the pulpit and how you feel about that because I'm so curious. I want to know why you left and how you gave yourself permission to leave. I want to know so many things. Okay. But before we go there, I think what we're feeling in real time in our life is that civility is lost and that truth. It feels like a post-truth world. And that sounds like such a big overarching statement, but it's become difficult to sit down and have conversations with family, with friends, with followers. And so I think that's my biggest question. That's kind of what I wrote down. Is it possible to restore civility in a post-truth world?
No. Not in the sense not in the sense of fixing it all at once. I had this conversation with one of my students 2 days ago where he was saying, what do I do? And I said, you notice what's happened and don't do that. And what you can't do is to control the entire rest of the world or even your family or your friend group. But what you can do is control it in terms of your own life. And that actually has all sorts of ripple effects, where for a lot of people, all they know is what they've seen. And so give them an alternative. And if enough people do that, that actually does make a difference. I think, honestly, there is an exhaustion point where a lot of people are going to get to the point where they say, okay, this isn't the way to live, of constantly being at each other's throats over every minor difference and major difference. So I'm kind of counting on exhaustion, but we've kind of gone long past what I thought would be exhausting to most people. So
it's true.
That makes it difficult. But I don't think there's an easy way out of this. This is a really difficult. And part of the problem for me is I would notice people, Christian leaders and so forth that I had respected, you can kind of trace what they were writing, and they would get more and more curmudgeonly and darker as they went on.
Yeah.
So I would say to people who are quite a bit older, is this just life, or does everything really seem to be having a nervous breakdown right now? And all of them have said, no, this is different. We're in a different moment, and there are all sorts of factors behind that. But it's going to be, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I can think of two things, like one that was more of a sort of like this affected everyone, and one that was a little more personal for us. Obviously, January 6th, what happened at the Capitol was, it seems like a dividing line. It seems like this is everything that happened before and everything that happened after. Like, whose side are you on? Kind of a vibe.
And how do we define good and evil? That became up for debate.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, when you see images, I just watched 4 Hours at the Capitol, the documentary.
I haven't seen that yet.
Which was difficult to watch because January 6th was so enraging for me, for all sorts of reasons. But to watch that and to see people with thin blue line, supportive of the police flags, attacking police officers. And you realize there's not even, what sort of cognitive dissonance has to be there to say, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But that was a really a pivotal moment. But I had sort of learned through some other experiences. There were many people who would call me that day and say, okay, this is now a tipping point. Because we all see now what we're dealing with.
Right.
And I said, no. I said, it's going to be, people are going to go quiet for a few days, and then it will be right back. And sure enough, when you start hearing people, because this is something you say, there is no way to defend that. And then you would have people, well, I'm not saying that an insurrection against the government and attacking Capitol police officers is a good thing, but I mean, when that happens, you're really on a trajectory.
Maybe I'm kind of like just doing this behind my back.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It was like, and I think I probably expected, this is what I'm trying to figure out, if I expected too much from church leadership at denouncing what happened. I was just enraged as well, and shocked, and just so many things. And I'm not from here, so I'm always trying to listen first. But in that moment, I had to, for my own definition of evil, say, this is not okay. This is not, I had to say it out loud. We had to post about it. And I mean, we lost 10,000 followers, like, instantly.
Sure.
And that's fine. And I wasn't there to convince anybody, but I was expecting alignment on calling this out as not okay.
Right.
But that wasn't really what happened. There was a lot of defending, and I think that's sort of what we're getting at. It's like truth. When truth, like, I don't know, what is truth anymore? And when you can't agree on that, how do you have conversation? And how is your starting place or your foundation allowing a friendship, or how do you have conversations?
Well, I think to some degree you don't. And this is what I mean by that. There are places where you have to say, we're actually not able to have this conversation, or we're not able to have this conversation now, or I'm not the one that's able to have this conversation. So, and I say this a lot to people who have families that are at each other's throats over some of these things, and to say, why don't you try this? And say, hey, Mom or Aunt Flossie or whoever you're talking to, you and I disagree on whatever it is.
Yeah.
I love you. I want to spend time with you. Why don't we just avoid that right now? And then maybe have a humorous sort of, we're headed into the danger zone when you start getting there, so that you can kind of warn each other. That's not going to work with everybody, because there are going to be some people who really, that's what they want to do.
They want to go there.
They want to go there and they
Yeah.
want to fight. But there are a lot of people for whom that's just not the case.
Right.
And there are some situations where you can't be the one to fix it. And so you have to kind of say, I've got to pull back right now so that I can maintain a relationship with this person, because otherwise, I mean, that just furthers it on along. Isolated, lonely people who are resentful then fall into, and because it's, as you say, with a loss of a sense of truth, it's impossible to have a place to go to say, here's where we're going to settle this. You know, that's just not
Right.
There was a time when there've always been sort of wacky conspiracy theories
Right.
that are out there. I mean, I remember having a relative warning about don't flash your brights if someone flashes the brights, because that means that they're in a gang and that's a way to attack you. And you're just like, come on. What you could do is to say, come look at Snopes.com. It's telling you where this is coming from. But now when people have completely different sources of information and they don't trust any other one, even that's impossible.
Yeah. I remember one of the first dinners we went to after the insurrection and
Right.
Yeah, and we were sitting there kind of, I think everyone that's listening probably has had this moment where you're, especially earlier on, now it's a little bit more normal to, you've been vaccinated or you haven't, you wear a mask or you don't. Like there's these indicator lights of where you are at.
Right.
And it's not a complete indication, and there's still room for conversation there, but it gives you an idea. But before any of that, I remember sitting down for dinner with some friends and kind of waiting for someone to talk about the weather, until someone sort of said where they were at on certain things. And then you could kind of exhale and be like, okay, we can really talk.
Right.
Well, it was actually, it was a conversation about the election.
That's right. That's right.
And you could tell that they were kind of like shifting in their seats a little bit until they finally said, we have something to tell you guys. We voted for this person, and there was just like this sigh, this exhale around the table. You realize,
and it was someone who had,
oh wow, we're all kind of on the same page. I didn't realize that, even though we've been close friends since we moved here.
And there is a certain amount of stress we all carry with just that.
Yeah.
Like just that, the tired interactions of kind of waiting and honoring people, honoring yourself.
Yeah.
And just that walk, that dance, you know, and it was.
And
actually,
that's one thing I actually don't have to face. So I'm kind of exempted from that part because so much of what I've had to do has been so public that it
everyone knows where you
already
are.
sorts it out.
True.
So people either already are so mad at me they don't want to talk to me,
Right.
or they're doing I know I'm not going to talk about in
Right.
front of him. And so
we're kind of following in your footsteps a little bit, not maybe
And to be
quite
honest,
as eloquently,
that's
but
kind of why we started tracking with you, because it was like, wait, he works for who? Wait, he thinks that? This is interesting.
And I really relate to what he's saying here, yet I think we maybe vote differently. This is amazing. And because we didn't really know, much about the SBC, who you were, but it was just, there were so many connection points and then so many moments where I was like frustrated with you because you were really, really making me think so hard and re-examine. And but I love that. I love that. And that's honestly what we see our role as. I know we're musicians, but we're communicators and we're conversationalists. And that's always been our heartbeat. It's like, we're writing this as a starting point to have a conversation with an audience. And social media, I think people think we're nuts, but we're just like, that's okay, and follow us if that's what's best for you.
Sure.
Maybe you'll come back. A lot do, especially if we say something really loving and then later on a mom goes, actually my son's gay and I don't know how to love him. I'm shunned from my church, but what you posted really made me want to talk to you about it. And it ends up becoming a safe place. So social media is nuts, but I hear you. We've kind of been pretty honest, but not like we know it all, because we know that we don't know. But we're also trying to honor where we're at and trust that that's respecting other people too.
Yeah. Well, and because one of the main things that I hear is, I thought I was crazy. And
Yes.
so there are so many people who are kind of, they feel as though they're in a situation where they think, am I the, I had someone who was talking to me about a meeting that she had been in, where she was looking around the room to say, does anybody else know that what's being said here is insane? So then
Right.
everyone just looks normal. I said, I have
Right.
been in those meetings many times. And she said that afterward, she talked to someone else who had been in the meeting and said, now I'm just checking myself. That was crazy, right? Oh, yeah, totally. But it had just become so normalized that she was starting to question herself. And I think that's the case for a lot of people right now. And they're trying. I mean, you mentioned Christian leaders. There aren't a lot of Christian leaders, or really any kind of leaders right now. There are a lot of followers, because people are looking to say, what's going to give me the easiest life? And what group of people do I need to sort of appease in order to do that? And they do it. Well, I mean, there are all sorts of problems with that, but one of the problems with that is that ultimately people aren't able to trust that you're telling them the truth about what you even think. So I don't expect everybody to agree with me, and there are many people that I learn from that I don't agree with at all. But I know that they're not pandering to me, or they're not afraid of me. They're really trying to tell me honestly.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you can say, I think maybe you're right. Sometimes you can say, I think you're wrong, but I see how you got there. I mean, I think that's valuable.
That's beautiful. I feel like that's going, I want to hear you, and I want to see you. That's what that communicates. And that's what Jesus did.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't always agree. He usually called them to the next step and like, okay, let's move here though, but it was a wandering and a blessing and a seeing and a helping people feel loved.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you don't have the hard conversations either,
Right.
Because Jesus said so many things that were so incredibly,
He usually had them face to face, though.
yeah, right. That's
Not-
true. It is
not like this.
Yeah.
It is very easy to hide behind our social media and just blast. But I think Brene Brown says that it's hard to hate someone up close, and it's true.
Yeah.
Right.
It's true. That's why stories are so big right now.
Well, that's why part of the problem that we're in, it's not that people are going to social media and doing all of these things. It's that social media is being replicated in the way that we actually interact up close.
Interesting.
And so you see so many of those things because they become so. I was asked by a reporter about something the other day and said, well, what did you think when this was said? And I said, I'm kind of ashamed to say and embarrassed. I didn't think anything of it. I just sort of shrugged my shoulder and said, oh, yeah, because that's just kind of normal now. We're all sort of getting normalized to this way of reacting. So you can see sort of patterns that people learn on social media showing up in the way they do church together.
Wow.
And, as you say, it is normally true that it's hard to hate somebody face to face, but it's getting easier because if you sort of learn to, it's kind of like with, my wife makes fun of me because I will, when I ask Alexa a question, I'll then say thank you afterward. And she's like, wait, why are you thanking this algorithmic machine?
Inanimate object.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like a person. And I think the same thing is sort of happening. The way that we relate to one another on social media starts to change us, and then we start to get into these, both in terms of the fact that the way we relate to one another, but also because we get into, just like you can on social media, where you can follow people who agree with you on everything and unfollow people when they don't.
Yeah.
So then you say, well, everybody thinks this. And increasingly people can do that even in terms of the real life relationships they're around. Because you just start excommunicating everybody, and then you end up with that.
That's the sad thing. I mean, in the day and age where Jesus was in the temple, I mean, debating and having heated debates about scripture was normal.
Yeah, yeah.
but I don't know that we know how to do that anymore, which makes me sad. And I also have found it, just to be honest, it's been difficult reading the Bible lately for me, just because it's been used as such a weapon in a lot of cases lately, or just to defend an argument. I'm just going to pluck this verse out, and the opposite, if we say something and we don't attach a verse to it, someone's like, show me where getting vaccinated is in Scripture. And it's like, all I can show you is love your neighbor. Like, that's all I can show you. I don't have that verse for you, but I read the Bible to know Jesus and worship Jesus. It's not the other way around for me. Of course, Scripture is very important. Of course it is. Like, I try and read it all the time, but lately it's been hard. Just being honest.
There was, I read this book several years ago by someone who was saying, there's a difference between Bible quoters and Bible readers. And it immediately resonated with me because I remember I would have lots of students and other people who knew the Bible well when it came to finding verses to argue Calvinism versus Arminianism or whatever the controversy was that they were interested in, but didn't know the difference between Josiah and Jehoiakim, because they weren't sort of living in the storyline of Scripture. It was, here's the controversy, and let me find the things that I need to argue with other people on. And that actually, sometimes that's necessary, but it's not transformative. And so for me, I think of when Jesus is being tempted in the wilderness, people will often say, notice that he quotes Scripture. Yes, and notice how he quotes Scripture. He's quoting from Deuteronomy 6 and Deuteronomy 8. You shall not live by bread alone, shall not put the Lord your God to the test, indicating, I know where I am in this story. And we have been here before with you. And I think that's an important part of it, which is why I think that people will sometimes say, what passage of Scripture do I need right now? And I'll say, you actually don't know what you need, because if you spend time in Scripture, that's getting you ready in ways that, sometimes you have to find some place where you say, I'm in this totally bizarre situation, I don't know what to do. But often it's just that when you get there, you've been shaped into the kind of person who kind of knows the plot. And I think that's a crucial part of it that's just really hard to do, with the way that the Bible's used, and also with the shortened attention spans that we have, and all of those things. It makes it harder to do.
That's so true. So with all that in mind, like just speaking about truth and Scripture and walking with the Lord, and then conspiracy, all of this, what made you come to a point, because we listened to your interview. Actually, it was a conversation. It was an interview with Beth Moore. I've done her Bible study since I was 13. I'd meet at Tim Hortons with a girlfriend after school. We'd take the bus, and it was like, and in Nashville, that would be normal. In Winnipeg, that's not normal. People are like, what are these two doing over here? A Bible in public, what's happening? So I've adored her for a long time, and I really appreciated the conversation. But I also wanted to ask you what you got to ask her, which was, how do you know when to stay? And how do you know when to go? And for you, what did that look like when it came to leaving the SBC and a role that you had been in for so long?
Yeah, and more than that, it was, the time and the place where I grew up, there was so much that was communicated to you about, this is who you are. I mean, this is, we're learning the names of missionaries, and we're, and so this was a key part of my identity, and that made it very difficult. The other part is that most of the people are great. The people are, and that's what, sometimes people would say to me, oh, it must be so difficult. I was, most of these people, I said to someone not long ago, 90% of the people are fantastic. And he said, I think your math is off. But I get your point. And that really was true. So my default was to stay.
Yeah.
And I would hear myself giving counsel to other people who would, I mean, for instance, there was a time when I thought, okay, I've had enough of this. And I talked to, I was a pastor called that I had taught and said, I think I'm going to leave my church, and because I've got this happening with these people. And I said, well, how many people are you talking about? And he said, 10. And I said, okay, you have 400 people in your church. That's 10 people. Why would you abandon the 390 because of the 10? And so I would listen to my own counsel in that way.
Right.
And I didn't want to. I think if anything, I waited too long because I really love these people and care about them, and couldn't imagine my life in it. And I mean, frankly, I was in the job that I had was my dream job since I was 19. And so I fully expected to be, rolled out of there in a wheelchair one day. Maybe I was, but in a different way than I had anticipated. So it was a long time of just sort of seeking counsel from people, praying. But then the turning point was, something with my son. When my son, who was 15 at the time, asked my wife when I wasn't there, has Dad had some sort of like a moral failure, like a moral scandal or something?
Wow.
That turned something in me.
Because of something he had read?
Yeah, just because he knew that,
there
was some controversy and all of these things. And so I just said to him, come with me when they read their grievances against me, and see what you think. I wanted him to know there is nothing that I'm hiding from him in this.
Right.
I can understand that. I mean, it gets real when your kids ask you a question like that.
Yeah.
Which also that he would ask that and even have that. That's beautiful too. Speaks to his journey. You have five
sons.
Five sons.
Well, he said when we walked out of that meeting, I said, what did you think? And I mean, of course, he didn't grow up in the same sort of world that I did. He grew up in a wonderful church context, but not in one that was where his identity is shaped and formed in that way.
Yeah.
So for me, it's traumatic to leave a Southern Baptist context for a multi-denominational context. For him, that wasn't traumatic. But when we're in the meeting, we laughed, and I said, what did you think? And he said, that was so stupid and angry, and I just want to know, why do you care what they think, and why do we want to be a part of this? And when I knew that I didn't have a good answer for him, and also when I was talking to people leading up to this, because I was constantly having to talk to people who were saying, African-American churches that had come into the SBC, or young church planters, or women who were seeing some things going on. And I would always be able to say, here's why you should be here. And I would often say, I remember saying to an African-American pastor, look, don't let them drive you out. Stay and be at the table. But increasingly, I started thinking, I'm not going to say that because I think that's going to hurt that person. And whether that was true, or whether my viewpoint was true or false, I don't, that's for other people to determine. But for me, when I couldn't say that, that's when I kind of knew it was time to go. And then the other part of it is, I think about Wendell Berry talks about I think it's in Jayber Crow, where he talks about how most of the decisions in his life didn't feel like decisions. They just felt like being sort of carried along, and you look back, and that was certainly the way that went. But I had people like Beth. I mean, we could talk, and I could constantly be saying, I want to make sure that I'm not making a mistake. And I mean, the other part of it is too, in my context, I knew most people are with me. I can win this. I didn't like the idea of what it would do to me to win. And so I just decided, when I look at the 21-year-old Southern Baptist who walked down the aisle to say, I'm surrendering my life to ministry, which is the language we used, and it was more accurate than I knew. I wanted to be able to be faithful to that call and to those ordination vows and so forth. And I decided I actually can be more faithful outside of here than I can inside of here, because if I don't, I'm going to turn into someone that I don't think it's right to be. And so it was easier it was at that point that I kind of decided, okay, we'll do something else.
I feel like everybody listening is going through some sort of, do I stay or do I go? What does this look like? Is it even possible to worship God and, be close to the Lord, but leave my church? Like, who am I worshiping? What am I worshiping? I think a lot of those questions, how do I teach my kids right now in a climate where a lot of the churches we play in on a Sunday morning, I don't want them to go to Sunday school there necessarily, because I'm worried about what and how something's being taught.
Are we going to have to re-engineer everything?
And some of it's just understanding that maybe teaching, a murder story to a 3-year-old isn't necessarily the best Bible story for that age group. I wouldn't let them watch a show about that, but that's another conversation for another day, how we read the Bible and how we read the Bible with our kids. But we'll have you back to ask you all those questions. But I think that's just real, because we're the same. Our default setting is stay.
Yeah.
Especially my faithful, amazing husband. We've employed people for so long that we're not happy, and we weren't either, but he's just so loyal and so faithful. And when we dig in, we dig in.
Well, yes, and this is a Muslim scholar who, she was talking to me about something completely different, and she was talking about a project she's working on loyalty. And she said the issue with loyalty is it has a shadow side. And so there's a way to veer off from it into disloyalty. And that's the sort of people who are looking to leave and are, wanting to, when a friendship gets difficult or a church isn't exactly what they default to leave. That's a problem. But there's also a kind of loyalty that turns into almost codependence or a sense of, I'm going to be loyal to something at all costs.
Yeah.
It's something that's not God himself. When that happens, then you end up with a lot of the really toxic things that we've seen. That's where it comes from, is people who are saying, well, we know that we have some awful things that are happening that are hurting people, but our church's ministry is so important that we have to just avoid that and not look at that. And then that leads to all sorts of awful things.
Yeah.
Something you said about when you were talking about walking out of the meeting with your son, and you said, why do you care? Like, why do you care about these people? And that just tweaked, like, I feel like that's been ingrained in every, church-going person as they grow up. You should care because we're commanded to care, because we're commanded to preach the gospel and be followers of Jesus and not, leave anyone behind. And
well, his question, to be fair to him, wasn't why do you care about these people? It's why is this so hurtful to you that this is the opinion of this group of people when it is obvious that, and his point is a good one in this sense. It is impossible to, someone's going to hate you. So I was talking to a friend who had written a book and got a bad review, and it really was hurting him. And I understood that because I know I mean, I don't read those reviews, but I know what I would be like if I did. And I said, look, this is one guy. So I just started sending him these 1-star Amazon reviews for all of these fantastic books that we both love. Someone saying about Marilyn Robinson's Gilead, meh, kind of boring. Those sorts of things. It's
right.
So Seth Godin, who I listen to and read a lot, would always say, the answer is, okay, well, this isn't for you.
Right.
And nothing is going to be for everyone. So when it comes to sort of being captive to people's opinion of you, you really do have to say whose opinion matters to me in such a way that I'm going to say, okay, this is someone I trust.
Yeah.
This is someone that I want to be like, and this is someone that I would go to if I were wanting to redirect my life. That's very different than saying any group of people all the time.
Right.
Because in order to become, even if you wanted to, in order to become the kind of person that would satisfy this group, you would have to betray this group and not be able to speak to them.
Right.
So that's always something that's kind of having to be calibrated and recalibrated and checked and rechecked.
Yeah.
We did think for a minute about making T-shirts that said "Good for you, not for me."
Yeah.
Maybe we shall still.
Maybe we still should.
Yeah.
No, but there is a freeing, like, to not just label something good or bad, but to go, like you said, I see where you're coming from. That's not for me, or that's not where I'm at. I
was speaking one time, and a musician that I love and I think is fantastic was performing right before I was to speak. And the person who was introducing him said, "This is so-and-so. Someone gave me his album years ago, and they really liked it. And I listened to it, and I didn't. But," and I was expecting him to say, but then later I went back to it and saw the richness of it. And he said, "But if, for those of you who like this sort of thing, this is the sort of thing you'll like." That's it.
And that was the end.
And my musician friend loved it. He said, "This is my favorite introduction I think I've ever had."
I can testify, being in the Christian music industry for 10 years now, that happens more often than care to admit.
I love it so much. For those of you that don't know, we have a Patreon.
Yay.
What's Patreon, you're asking? It's basically like a subscription to all things Love and the Outcome. But it's more than that. We give specially created content just for you. We release the podcast early to you. We ask you for your questions and who you want on the podcast. We do worship and prayer nights where it's really specific and one-on-one. There's a whole bunch more things.
We geek out on Love and the Outcome songs and how we made them, how we wrote them.
Bass videos a la Chris Rademacher. So if that's something that sounds fun, you can subscribe. There's a whole bunch of tiers. And for as little as $10 a month, you can get all things Love and the Outcome. So shout out to our patrons that make this podcast possible.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Denise and Emily and Stephanie, Michelle and Greg and Misty, Dr. Scott, Jeremy, Emily, Stacy, Lisa, Rick and Marcel, Mary, Biff, Dad Rad, Rachel, Glynis, Matt, Eva, and Sean.
Become a patron. Go to patreon.com/loveandtheoutcome. And like always, if this podcast is life-giving to you and you're enjoying it, subscribe to it. Share it with a friend. We would love that. Thanks, everyone.
This podcast is brought to you by Hope and Healing International.
For $30 a month, $1 a day, you can sponsor a life-changing surgery for a little boy or girl living in Africa. We're talking about club feet, cleft palates, going from blindness to sight. In 1 year, you can literally send a healing hug and change a child's life.
If you'd like more information, go check out the website at lovehealinghugs.com, and you can see video of our buddy Bernard.
This is my son, Bernard. He wants so much to be and play like the other children, but he can't. Instead, He suffers every day. As a father, I would do anything for my son. I love him, but sometimes this is not enough. They say they can heal my boy. I told them, I work hard, but I have no money to pay for it. They told me someone in Canada is paying to heal my son.
For over 100 years, Hope and Healing International has helped break the cycle of poverty and disability for thousands of children in the poorest communities. But we can't do it alone. For $30 a month, you will directly fund the surgeries, medical care, and rehabilitation for a child who would otherwise go untreated. A child just like Bernard. We will send you a picture of every child you help, their treatment plans, and progress reports. And each child we treat on your behalf will receive this bear to hug on their journey ahead. All you have to do is go online or call now. It's that simple.
Thank you for making my son smile again.